Welcome to part 4 of the Atavism X Combat Tutorial series. In this video, we'll be learning how to utilize the Coordinated Effects plugin, but if you are new to Atavism, I recommend you follow along the entire series because of the way that all of the combat plugins work together. Let's get started. The Coordinated Effects plugin is used to activate animations, particle effects, and sounds whenever necessary. Atavism does this by calling on a Coordinated Effects prefab and creating it server-side. The prefab tells the player and its targets to play animations for all nearby players so that it appears on every nearby client instead of just the client who used the ability. If you open up the Atavism X editor, you can navigate to the Coordinated Effects plugin by opening up the Combat tab and then selecting the plugin. If you press the plus icon in the bottom right, we'll be presented with only two options. This is because most of the work will be done on the prefab itself and not within the Atavism editor. Here is simply where we will save the prefab and name it to let Atavism know that it exists so that it can be used. If you've set up your editor properly, the file browser should connect to the Coordinated Effects folder within the Resources folder in your Unity project. In this folder, you'll find numerous examples of Coordinated Effects prefabs that already exist that we can use as a reference, so let's start by going over to the Unity project itself. Open up your demo Atavism Unity project and then search out the Resources folder in your file browser, and then open up the Content folder and then the Coordinated Effects folder. Here you will see the example coordinated effects available to use in the Atavism demo. We, of course, like always, would like to create ours from scratch, so let's do that. Go to whatever scene you are in and create an empty game object. We'll name the object Punch Effect for our ability. Then on the inspector, click Add Component and type in Chord. This will give you a list of all the types of coordinated effect scripts you can use to bring your abilities to life. Some of them are very specialized and some of them are all-encompassing. The ones you will most likely use often are Chord Animation, Chord Particle Effect, and Chord Projectile. We won't go over the rest, but they are pretty straightforward and very similar in nature to these three. First, let's look at the Projectile Effect. You'll see all of the parameters needed here to create a projectile, decide how fast it's traveling, and how it behaves when it hits the target. It can repeat as well, and you can decide if the projectile starts from your hands, your feet, your head, etc. Here you'd also assign the sound of the projectile flying through the air and the impact sound and the effects on impact. It's pretty flexible and makes it easy to create spells and arrow projectiles, but we won't be needing this for our punch ability, so we'll remove it from our game object. However, in the top right section of any of these coordinated effects scripts, you can click the Help button and it will show you informative tooltips that explain what each of the fields do in order to help you understand how to fill out each of the parameters. So if you're not sure, make sure to hit that button first. Next, let's go over Coordinated Particle Effect. This script is used for creating particle effects and effect objects, and it's possible to assign sounds, and you can create sounds that play specific to the gender of the caster or target. We will use this effect to create a little bit of an impact particle on our target after the punch hits them. First, we want to add a small delay to when the impact effect appears on our target to give our animation time to play out. We want the effect on our target, so we'll switch it to target, and we want the effect to appear on the target's head, so we'll select head. And for the particle object, we will just grab something from the demo to use just to see it's working. We'll choose Flash Ring 01. And lastly, we'll add a sound effect for this impact. Press Add under the Male sound effects and use the browser to find a file called flag_got_hit. It's the best sound for what we need in the demo. Good, so far our coordinated effect will now play an effect and a sound on the target 0.3 seconds after we use the ability. Now we are just missing an animation, and that's where the Chord Animation effect comes into play. For this script, we need to select what animation is being played and what parameter is being called on in the animator. In our case, it is a character object type, and the animator is Mechanim and not Legacy. Make sure to fill these out correctly for whatever you are using the animation for. The animator parameter we will use for this is going to be a trigger, but you can also use bools, floats, or ints depending on how your animation controller is set up for your character in your game. I'll go over how to set this up in the default demo controller in a moment, so don't panic if you are not familiar with animation controllers. For now, for our trigger, we're going to name it punch, and let's select caster to look at target. We want the caster to play this punch animation with no activation delay, and we'll guess the animation is about 1.5 seconds long. Make sure to pay attention to what you type here as the animation trigger's name, as it is case sensitive and it will look for this exact name in your animation controller as a parameter to activate. We could also actually add the effect here in our punch on the caster or the target if we wanted. You'll see that this particular coordinated effect script is pretty all-encompassing, and in some cases it will be the only coordinated effect script you will need for your ability, but for us we can leave the bottom half of the script empty as we are using the particle effect script to add effects to our target. Now this coordinated effect is basically finished. As it is, it will play the punch animation and then play an impact sound and effect on our target. So let's make sure to save our punch effect prefab by dragging it from the hierarchy into the coordinated effects folder, and just to be safe, reset the position of the prefab to 0. Now we have two ways to let the server know this coordinated effect exists. We can do it using the Unity editor, or we can use the Atavism editor itself. I prefer the Atavism editor, so we'll reopen the Atavism editor and open the Combat tab on the left side, and then select the Coordinated Effects plugin and hit the plus icon in the bottom right of the screen, and then we'll name our effect the Punch Effect. Then hit the Choose File button and we should be able to find our Punch Effect prefab in the Coordinated Effects plugin folder. Select it and hit save, and now we can assign this coordinated effect to our punch ability. To do that, we will go to our abilities plugin and looking for our unarmed strike ability, which you should have if you've been following along this tutorial from part 1. Otherwise, you can add this to whatever ability you are working on for practice. With the unarmed strike ability open, scroll down to coordinated effects where we can decide when this effect will be used. In our case, we want it to be used the instant we punch the target, so we will select activating, and then we can type in punch effect and add it on the right, and then hit update to save the changes. Now all we have to do is restart the server and everything should be set up server side for our ability and coordinated effect. If you are using the cloud server, you can restart by pressing the green circles in the top right and select restart server, but make sure to restart the server appropriately depending on how you are hosting it. Now let's go back to the Unity project. Even though the coordinated effect is technically ready server side, it's going to tell our character's animator to play a punch trigger animation, which doesn't exist. So it won't do anything. So now it's time to do some work with the demo animation controller. The quickest way to get to the animation controller that the demo characters use is just by typing in animator controller in the search bar and then opening it up. This may look a bit intimidating to you if you are unfamiliar with animation controllers, but it's surprisingly simple. First, select the Parameters tab on the top left to see the parameters that already exist in the animation controller. By default, Atavism will always keep the controller updated on whether the character is in combat or not, how fast they are going, and if they are on the ground, and what weapon they are using. So you can create different idle animations based on these parameters. In addition, there's also triggers for crit, evade, dodge, block, and parry, so whenever those events occur, if you want, you can add special animations for them, but none of them are present by default. We need to create an animation trigger named Punch with a capital P because that's what our coordinated effect is going to try to send. So hit the plus icon and then select Trigger and then name it Punch. Now go back to the Layers tab and we'll see that we have a base layer and an arms layer. The base layer plays an animation for the entire body, whereas we can set the arms layer to only play an animation to certain parts of the body. It's really common in MMORPGs that the players will want to move and jump around while they are attacking things. So it's a good idea to use the arms layer mask over the body so that the player can still be using the walk animations at the same time as using attack animations. By default though, the animation arms layer has no mask on it, so we'll create one really quick. Right click the resources folder and then go to create and then select avatar mask. We'll just name it arms mask. Then open up the humanoid component on the inspector and unselect the legs and the head. This mask will now only cover the chest and arms and hands, which is what we want. Now we can go back to the arms layer in our animation controller, press the cog wheel and add the arms mask to it, and we'll set the weight to 1. 1 is basically 100% playing over the base layer, whereas lower would make it less dominant and take more of the base layer's animation into account. Now that our layer is set up, we just need an animation. There's not a whole lot to choose from in the Atavism demo, so you'll likely want to use your own animations. You can grab some off Mixamo or grab some off of the Unity asset store for free or what have you. If you're just testing out the demo though, you can search Knight with the @ symbol at the end and then select attack 1 and then cancel the search and you'll find the attack 1 animation, which kind of looks like a punch. So open up the animation and grab the attack 1 animation and drag it into our animator on the arms layer. Here we can rename it to punch. And then from the any state, we'll make a transition to our punch animation. Select the transition and then set the condition as the punch trigger and then uncheck exit time. Then simply make a final transition to null state with an exit time. What this will do now is whenever the coordinated effects tells us to play the punch trigger, that no matter what our arms are doing, it will play that punch animation, and once it's done, it will just go back to doing nothing and the base layer will take over. We're using any state for the attack because in the future we may want to allow the player to cast abilities or do special attacks from any state as well, and we want that to be able to cancel out the auto attack animation and prioritize the last used abilities animation to make it easier for the player to see what they are currently doing. Though you may prefer to use bools for your attacks, it's really up to you. But yeah, now everything should be set up exactly the way we need it to be, so we can press the play button. Log into Atavism, then select your character and log in with them. Now we only assigned auto attack to the warrior in the previous videos, so make sure your character class is warrior for now and then log in with them. And once we're in the game, when we run up and we right click one of the monsters, we should play our attack animation and then there should be the flashy impact and the sound effect that will play 0.3 seconds later. It is working exactly the way we want it to. Now the animation and the effect and the sound might be questionable, but I'll leave the artistic choices to you as you design your own game and make it look the way you want. But that's it, we've created a skill, ability, effect, and coordinated effect and put them all together to make our basic punching auto attack. You should now have a basic understanding of how all of these tools work, and you can now start fiddling with them and work on creating your ideal abilities for your MMORPG. But if you're still intimidated, don't worry, there's gonna be a part 5 left where I will be going over how to make a couple of more complicated abilities using these plugins and showing how fast and easy it can be to create them all. And if you have any questions, be sure to drop by the Atavism Discord where your fellow developers and Atavism staff will be around to help answer any of your questions. Don't forget to subscribe to the Atavism YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to be alerted when new videos on Atavism are released. Have a great day and happy developing.